G'day people, welcome to Perth WAtch, your horology channel broadcasting from right here in Perth, Western Australia. Today I am featuring another watch from my friend and local supporter Graham. Graham has lent me so many watches over the years. I haven't gone back to him for a while, but I've gone back now because I've finished some of the projects that I'm working on. So we are going to feature this particular piece today. This is none other than the Explorer 2 from Rolex. I haven't reviewed Rolex for quite a while now. In fact, the first one I did was one of the early videos from the channel. So check out the 5-digit Submariner review, which I published quite a number of years ago now if you're interested. But today what we have is this piece. I don't have a box. This is just going to be the review of the watch itself. But that's okay, right? We're really just interested in the meat here. So let's flip the camera around now and get into this piece. Okay guys, so here we have the watch on the review table. So this is of course the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Explorer 2. The reference is 216570. All other links and information below if you want to visit official sites and whatnot. As far as I gather, it's difficult to ascertain, but I think the US MSRP is 8,700 as far as I know. I think it was cheaper, of course, when it first came out, and then the price has gradually gone up over the years. The current MSRP, closest I can ascertain, 8,700. I know for a fact that the MSRP in Australia is 11,700 Aussie dollars, right? That's really what you can find on the Rolex website. It doesn't let me check it from the US perspective. Okay, so let's open this up and let's talk about the movement next. All right, and in here is the Rolex Caliber 3187, which is kind of like a little bit of a change or modification of the famous 3186, which is the one in the previous GMT Master 2s. But as far as I can ascertain, it is simply a different sizing to fit in this case, which is slightly bigger. So all specs down the left hand side of the screen here. I'm really not going to read this out, but suffice to say that the additional, I guess, marketing features they put in here, the parachrome hairspring, which is a kind of an anti-magnetic or non-magnetic, and then it's got what they call their Paraflex shock absorbers, which I guess they would tell you that it provides better shock protection than otherwise without that kind of special shock absorber. The rated accuracy, right? So Rolex is supposedly calling themselves superlative chronometer. So it's supposed to be plus or minus 2 seconds per day after casing. This one isn't actually running to that anymore. In fact, it's running on the very outside limit of cost standard at plus 6 seconds per day average on the 2 weeks that I have had this. Okay, so, is that a question mark on this watch? If it's actually a few years old, that kind of is telling me that, well, they are saying that they need to service this watch to maintain accuracy. So that kind of is a little bit of a cloud on their superlative chronometer, at least on this particular model that I have in hand here. Okay, now enough of the belt movement. Let's talk about the case. The case here, 42mm, okay, but I'll just show you, there's a little bit of a taper, right? It's kind of at the bottom is wider than the top. The bezel is actually slightly narrower than that at 41.5mm at the bezel. This is of course not 316L steel. Rolex call it Oyster steel, but really it's 904L steel. That's what they use. Much more difficult to work with and therefore more expensive to make. Overall thickness of this watch is 12.5mm to the top of the crystal, which is pleasing, right? It's actually fairly slim. The lug width is 21mm. Yes, you heard me right. It's 21, not 22 or 20. It's 21. Why did they make it that? That's a little bit annoying, to be honest. Lug to lug width is 50mm between my thumbs, and the overall weight on metal bracelet is 153 grams with a number of links removed to fit my 17cm wrist. Okay, so talk about brushing. So brushing and finishing, right? There's radial brushing on the top of the steel bezel with the nice high contrast black markings there. Longitudinal brushing on the top surface of the lugs, and it transitions onto that high polish, which many of this kind of oyster case tends to do. I'll point out that the side of the bezel is also polished. Okay, that's what the finishing is. At the bottom of the case, you're getting circular brushing, including the periphery of the case back. And the case back itself, of course, is the famous Rolex plain, kind of it's just got a brushing finishing there. It's just astounding to me that they still do this kind of plain case back. For the prices that they charge, you would think that they can kind of afford to give us a bit of art, a bit of finishing on the case back, right? What do you think of that? Let me know your thoughts. I really wish they would do something with their case backs to give us something pretty to look at. Yes, it's on the back, but hey, other watches, many other watches do it. So, right, so that's got that boring screw down solid case back. It's got a sign crown. Of course, you're going to get the crown on the crown. Crown on the crown, how cool is that, right? This crown is actually a dual lock or twin lock instead of the trip lock that you might find in a Submariner. So the water resistant rating they are giving us here is 100 meters. They actually don't even tell it on the dial here. You kind of have to kind of look it up to find out that this is a 100-meter waterproof rating from Rolex. Okay, so let's talk about the dial now. The dial here is a deep black. It's really quite a cool deep black. It's almost like a color that sucks in light here that makes it black no matter where you see it. It's got printed details, richly printed, right? Rolex and Explorer 2 in orange and superlative chronometer and all that. But it's pretty rich, but hey, it's still printed. None of that is applied. It does have that printed chapter ring around the periphery and 11 applied indices around the dial there, minus the 3 o'clock position because of the date window, of course. Okay, that's really what you're seeing here. The hands are, of course, Mercedes. In this case, it's polished. But in the middle, you can see they've got that phantom black, right? So that effect is meant to give you the illusion that the hands are kind of floating above the dial. Most of the time, it does actually give a pretty cool look. It's quite a different look to the Submariner, this kind of floating black phantom thing that they got here. I don't mind it. I quite like that effect. It's of course got the lollipop lume pip on the second's hand, and it's got the arrow orange splash on the GMT hand that you can see there. So the slight splash of color in an otherwise black and white dial is pretty good. It's a welcome change that they've put that orange there, and a lot of people do seem to like that. The lume is their Rolex Chromolite. Is that just a marketing gimmick? They claim that it is better than other lume, but I'm going to do a lume comparison and call it out if it is in fact just a marketing gimmick. So keep an eye out for that video to come pretty soon. Of course, I will put a lume shot for you to see how it looks like in the dark, and of course you can see it is a lume on all 4 of the hands here. Okay, so that's the description of the dial here. Around the dial is of course this bezel which is fixed, right? They haven't gone for rotating bezel here. It's radial brush with that very rich black printing on that 24-hour markings on the bezel. On top of the dial is the Rolex flat sapphire with the Cyclops magnifier, right? And there we go, 2.5 times magnification on the date position there. Like it or hate it, it is actually a staple of almost all their watches. Okay, that's the description of the case, guys. Let's move on to the bracelet, which is, of course, an Oyster bracelet, the original Oyster from Rolex, right? Brushed along the top, polished along the side. That's the finishing here. It's 21 at the case, as I mentioned, tapers to 15.5 at the narrowest point right here in the middle of the screen here. Solid end links, of course, screw links as you would expect from watches from Rolex. They are screw links. And then with regards to the clasp is what they call oyster lock, which means that it's got this lifting bit here where you would release it, and then it's got that additional keeper with a very precisely positioned Rolex crown. I like how precise it is, very easy and convenient to just lift that up. And then the engineering of the clasp is excellent, right? Everything is fitted very well. Okay, that's what they have, solid arms. And then I'll just show you the 5mm extension, right? They call this a comfort extension. By no means is it a dive suit extension. So you open it up and it extends it by 5mm for comfort. And then the last thing to point out is that there is a micro adjustment. Hopefully you can see the position inside the clasp there. Very difficult to point out there. but you do have to get in with a tool to release the spring bar inside here to change the position of this thing for so-called micro adjustment. Not really something you can do on the fly, but at least there is some positioning that you can do there without taking out a full link. Probably you would just use the half links if you really need to, rather than move that around, I imagine. Okay, so that's the entire description of the watch. Let's just put it on the wrist shot for you guys now, and there we have it, the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Explorer 2 on my 17cm wrist. It is actually very borderline for me, 50mm lug-to-lug width on my 17cm wrist. It actually looks very big, certainly has a lot of wrist presence, and it's actually kind of borderline to whether it's all right for me to wear this, but there we go, that's how it looks like, right? 12.5mm thickness there, so pleasingly thin, and it's very easy to get that under a shirt cuff, to be honest, and no problems doing that. Okay, so that's the description. What have I particularly liked about this watch? Well, look, it is a Rolex. You're getting all that comes with it, in-house, full manufacture, the quality, high-grade finishing on that 904L steel, which almost no other brand uses. Very, very few other brands dare to take on 904L steel. Right, so-called superlative chronometer, which presumably it does achieve that when it's out of the store, but this one, of course, as I mentioned, is running outside of that now, so it does need a bit of a service, I guess, if you want to retain that. And then in terms of value retention, it does that just like no other brand. Almost no other brand will beat Rolex. This is a sports model, so definitely it is going to appreciate in value if it's kept well, and you want to resell it for later. It's got a bracelet which I would say is extremely comfortable. I guess the finish and the fit here is really second to none other that I've reviewed, and there's something just a little bit special about these Oyster bracelet. They look the same as the knockoffs, but this one, there's just a certain feel about it that makes it extremely comfortable on the wrist, and I will give it that. It is something special about the bracelet, the way they've done it. It's got a great GMT movement, right? This one essentially is the same as the GMT Master 2 movement, the old ones, and I'll just show you how it functions. Basically, you would pull it out the first position for the hour adjustment. It's not the date adjustment, and then just show it to you. Independent hour hand while the seconds is still running, and that's very cool, right? It lets you kind of change time zones and all that, and then that's the date movement. And the cool thing is that you can go backwards on the date. That's something you can do with these GMT movements from Rolex. And then to adjust the time itself, you would actually pull this up and then move that around, and then that would move the GMT hand. That's really how you're meant to move this particular watch, right? That's how you're using it. Okay, so I'm just going to put it to the classic 10 past 10 position here for the pretty look. Don't know why it is, but I guess that's the balanced look that watch catalogs tend to use. So great GMT movement, really like how they implement that. That's one of the, I guess, best ways to implement a GMT movement. And it's actually quite versatile despite being 42mm. It somehow gets away with it. It's got a slightly formal look to this sports look, and you can easily wear this with a shirt and tie if you have a large enough wrist. This is slightly too large for me. And then overall, I would say, out of the Rolex sports models, this is not as common. And if you want something slightly different, this is possibly something you would choose. It's not a sub, it's not a GMT Master 2, it's not even a Daytona, which arguably is more popular but more difficult to get. This is slightly off the beaten track if you want something different. What are the weaknesses? What are my concerns? Well, it's kind of the typical Rolex holdbacks, right? They've kept the old 3187 movement in here instead of giving us the newer 3285. They haven't renewed that. Right, the 3285 has larger barrels, so superior power reserve and whatnot. So they've kind of just held it back a bit. They haven't given us a rotating bezel, and I guess that's not wanting to kind of shoot themselves in the foot, because that would make it the same function as a GMT Master 2. They haven't given us a glide lock, which the Submariner has. It's this kind of very difficult to use micro adjustment, which you can't do on the fly really. So a little bit of a little bit of holding back themselves here. And then no trip lock crown. You know, they haven't gone for anything other than 100-meter water resistant here. So it definitely doesn't have the 300 meters of the sub. It doesn't even have the 200 of other watches, or say 150 of an Aquaterra. It's just 100 meters, which I guess for the vast majority of us is fine, right? It's just that it's not the same as one of their higher resistance watches. And, you know, whilst they've kind of avoided shooting themselves in the foot, so to speak, by not giving us a GMT Master 2 function, well, it probably does end up doing that anyway, because the GMT Master becomes the superior watch that is far more in demand than this one. This one, you can understand why, you know, it's really not their biggest seller. Okay guys, so that's my thought on this watch. Let's flip it around now for the wrap up. So there you go guys, my review of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Explorer 2. Let me know what you think. I think it's very difficult to say much new about this watch because of course it's no longer a brand new watch, right? It's actually quite a number of years old now. But you know, I've kind of just said my thoughts based on using this for a couple of weeks now. If you have Rolex, if you have this model, certainly would enjoy hearing what you think, particularly about this model, which I think as you look into the details, you can understand why it's never going to be their best seller. There's just certain things that they've held back on, you know, rather than giving us the very best they can. That's how I feel about this. So guys, if you enjoy my videos, do consider subscribing. New content every week, always aiming to be objective and unbiased about all things horology. Thank you again for sticking with me, and as always, I'll catch you guys again next time.